If you're an avid viewer of my videos, then you have heard me state on more than one occasion how associates cause most of the beefs the mob experiences. It's a fact. 9 out of 10, if there's a beef, somehow an associate is behind or involved in it. The following video is featuring Ralph Lento, a former Lucchese associate who's often mislabeled as a member. He was never a member of the Lucchese family. I don't personally know him, but I recently mentioned that one day in Howard Beach, he came over to say hello to Joey DiBenedetto while we were in the Dunkin' Donuts. Afterwards, Joey explained why he didn't introduce him to me and called him a dog. And despite not knowing Lento, this was not the first time I heard his name. In fact, anytime someone mentioned him, it was not in a positive way. In 2002, the FBI intercepted calls in which Lento reached out to former Lucchese member Vinnie Baldi Salinardi in regard to silencing witnesses who were scheduled to testify against disbarred lawyer Frank Gangemi, who was facing charges for swindling his clients out of $6 million. Gangemi's father, John, was a former city councilman. In 2003, Lento pled guilty to making threats to collect loan payments and was released in November 2005. I'll fast forward to Johnny Sideburns telling me about Lento's time in federal prison. One day, Sideburns asked me if I knew him, and I said I didn't. He explained that Lento was a washwoman who knew everyone's business, and while in federal prison, he became close to Matty Madonna. And if my memory serves me right, he may have even been with Vic Amuso. And what Lento divulged while in prison had to do with a video that I put out 3 years ago. Apparently, the Lucchese's Brooklyn Bensonhurst crew, led by Joey Flowers Tangora and his acting captain, Bubsy Castelli, operated out of a social club on 13th Avenue in Brooklyn. The crew consisted of members such as Scotty Gervasi and Joey DiBenedetto. One of the associates in the crew was Big John Castellucci, as well as Lester Ellis and Robert Greenberg. Prior to Tangora becoming the captain of the crew, it was ran by Georgie Nexapola and Frankie Bones Papani and Georgie Conti, both of whom were acting captains. The Bensonhurst crew had a reputation of being degenerate gamblers and known not to pay bookmakers when they lost bets. Conversely, if they won, they wanted their money yesterday. At the time, the Lucchese family's acting boss was Joe DeFede, who held the position from the mid-90s up until 1998. Before him was Al Diaco. The Bensonhurst crew, as it was explained to me, didn't respect DeFede, but they tolerated him. One of the sins of the crew was skimming, not handing in or kicking up the proper amount of money. Over the years, and after an internal investigation, that amount was somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million, which naturally is a significant amount of money, to say the least. Okay, back to Lento. The way Sideburns explained it was Lento was in the same prison as Matty Madonna, and Matty was using him to get as much information as he could. When he heard about the millions that the Bensonhurst crew pocketed, and as it was explained to me that they gambled, ate, and drank away, Matty took this information and used it to his advantage by telling Vic Amuso. Sometime in September of 2000, Louis Dedon became the acting boss. DeFede was indicted in April of 1998 on federal racketeering charges relating to the Lucchese's rackets in New York City's Garment Center. Once released in 2001, he began cooperating. So this information regarding the missing millions went from the gossiping Lento to Matty to Vic and out to Louis Dedon. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar to just how serious skimming is, years ago, it could get you killed. Coincidentally, DeFede was being accused of doing just that, which was why he began cooperating. Typically, at least 10% of what a crew is bringing in should be kicked up to the administration, and that's just the minimum. But there was also family money collected and not handed in. What I believe happened is the crew was keeping the collected money and not turning it over to DeFede. Once DeFede was indicted, the Bensonhurst crew kept everything, which equated to millions, and then blamed DeFede for skimming. Nevertheless, when Louis Dedon took over as acting boss, he placed Johnny Sideburns as the captain of the Brooklyn crew and told him to start inquiring about the missing money. The problem and how the Bensonhurst crew ultimately got away with skimming was that during that time, there was a lot of confusion going on inside the family. Being that Sideburns was sniffing around and asking questions caused members of the old Bensonhurst crew to greatly dislike him. Even though they were fully aware he wasn't inquiring on his own. I had a conversation with Scotty Gerasi one day regarding the money. He laughed and said, "What did they think we did with the money? We spent it." Joey DiBenedetto told me, "We were bad. I don't know how we got away with some of the things we did." If you haven't liked this video yet, please take the time now and give it a like, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. Anyone who'd like to show their appreciation for videos like this, or more importantly, help me to continue making them, you can donate with the Super Thanks icon down below, or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Let me quickly mention my blog, also called Sit Down News, especially for those of you who still enjoy reading. The site can be found at sitdownnews.com and is a paid subscription. Here's the bottom line. The Bensonhurst crew did in fact take the money. Somehow, Lento caught wind of this and used it to get in Maddie's good graces by exposing the Bensonhurst crew, which could have very well led to people getting killed. I believe in the end, Lento was ultimately chased as a Lucchese associate. In 2008, he was involved with a Genovese associate, Joseph Barafato, and Genovese captain, Anthony Antico, in an extortion scheme, where Lento and Barafato took the intended target for coffee, but instead of going to a coffee shop, they drove to Coney Island and pulled up next to Antico's car and introduced the target to Antico. So it's obvious Ralph Lento began hanging around the West Side and more than likely exposing their secrets as well.